Supply and demand is one of the most important fundamental concepts in all of macroeconomics. It's a critical foundation upon which you will build your entire understanding of future concepts in this curriculum. So to understand this important topic, let's break it into understandable bits and take a look at each one. Demand, simply put, is the willingness of consumers to purchase different quantities of different goods and services and the prices they're willing to pay for each of them. We hear this word thrown around a lot when we talk about prices of things we want to buy. When there's a higher amount of demand, then more people want to buy a good or service at that price level. And when there's a lower amount of demand, there are less people want to buy that good or service at that price level. The specific number of goods and services demanded at certain price levels is known as the quantity demanded. Now, in order to visualize this concept, we need to understand a typical supply and demand graph. It has an X and Y axis. On the y-axis, we see the price level of the goods, and on the x-axis, we have the quantity, basically the amount of goods in the market. When it comes to demand, the quantity is the quantity demanded and the price level at which these different quantities are being demanded. On this graph, plotting a simple demand curve for, let's say, bananas, we can see that the points show us in conjunction with the x-axis that a specific quantity is demanded. And from that point, we can see at what price level that quantity is demanded. So in this case, we can see that consumers demand 4 bananas at a price level of $3. The line represents the overall demand in the market for bananas. This is the law of demand. When the price level increases, then there are less quantities demanded of that specific product. But when the price level drops, the quantity demanded increases. But so far, we've only been moving along the curve itself. Let's say that this is the price of bananas today, but suddenly tomorrow a medical study comes out that states that eating a lot of bananas can prevent cancer. Well, naturally, demand for banana increases. When this happens, the curve shifts up to the right. People are willing to buy bananas at lower quantities, but higher price levels. The quantity demanded of bananas has increased at every price level compared to the situation before the study. Now the opposite. Say in the next week, doctors say that bananas can make people have worse skin. Now the entire demand curve shifts to the left, down, and there's less quantity demanded at lower price levels. Demand for bananas has dropped overall, with people avoiding it to not get the purported bad skin. So in terms of demand, remember that when consumer demand increases, the curve shifts to the right up, and when demand decreases, the demand curve shifts to the left down. But what are the causes of such changes in demand? Well, there are 6 in total, and an easy way my teacher taught me to remember them is through the acronym INSECT. Going through them one by one, these are changes in consumer income. Perhaps people have more money to spend on things, so naturally demand would increase for all products, or people have reduced income, leading to less demand. Number 2, changes in the price of substitute goods. Let's say soda is really popular in your town store. There's also sparkling water that is better, but more expensive. It's a substitute. Let's say the price of sparkling water drops to be the same as soda. Well, now more people are buying sparkling water, decreasing the demand for soda. The opposite is true if the price of sparkling water increases. More people will buy soda and increase its demand. Number 3, changes in the price of complementary goods. Basically, when the demand for an object is linked to its utility with another object, let's say pillows and beds. Pillows and beds are complementary goods because they are closely linked with one another. If someone buys a bed, then they will probably get a pillow. If the price of beds were to drop, then demand for the complementary good in the form of the pillow will increase. And the opposite is true if people buy less beds when they get more expensive. Naturally, people will buy less pillows because they are getting less beds. Number 4, changes in tastes and preferences. In modern society, people like to eat meat, and therefore demand remains high for these products. But let's say in the future more people change to being vegetarian or vegan, then the demand will drop for products with meat. Or if people decide to eat more meat in the future, then this will increase the demand. Number 5, future expectations. If there is an expectation for a change in the price of a good in the future, let's say people think that with a new government carbon tax on phone production that they will become more expensive by the next weekend, then there will be more demand from people to buy phones now so that they can avoid these more expensive prices in the future. Number 6, the number of buyers. When other factors remain constant but there are simply more buyers in the market, then this will obviously lead to prices increasing due to increased demand. And the opposite is true when there are less buyers in the market. Going back to our graph, we've already looked at demand, but now we can add a new line that goes this way. This is the supply line. This line corresponds with the quantity supplied at different price levels. Like the law of demand, which states that at a lower price level there is more demand, the law of supply states that when the price of a good rises, then there will be an increased supply of that good in the market. We can see this relationship play out on our graph. We can see that on the supply curve, at higher price levels, there is a higher quantity of a good supplied, and when we move down towards the lower price levels, then there is less supplied. Just like with demand, there are a few classifications that affect the supply of a good. The determinants of supply, which you can remember through rotten. Number 1, cost of resources as an input. Let's think about a pizza. What do we need to make one? Tomatoes, cheese, the dough? Let's say due to an unusually good growing season, all these become significantly cheaper, and therefore pizza can be made at a significantly less cost. This translates to a higher profit for pizzerias and will lead to more pizzerias wanting to capitalize on this new increase in profitability. So the supply curve shifts to the right. There's an increased quantity supplied of pizzas at all price levels. Number 2, improvements in technology and productivity will lead to an increased ability to produce more of a good. Therefore, there is an increase in the supply, creating a rightward shift for the curve. Number 3, taxes and subsidies can also affect the supply of a good. Take for example strawberries. Let's say there is an increase in the per unit tax of strawberries by around 30 cents. This will lead to a decrease in the supply of strawberries as the end profit margin is decreased by the new tax and discourages growers from producing the fruit. This will lead to a leftward shift in the supply curve, whereas government subsidies that give money to the growers to grow strawberries, which is essentially the opposite of taxes, will lead to growers producing more and increasing the supply of strawberries, leading to a rightward shift in the supply curve. Number 4, expectation of prices. Say sellers of backpacks are making a lot of profit during the back-to-school period and as a result have been supplying a large amount of backpacks. Now, the suppliers have doubts about whether the backpacks can sell at high prices after the back-to-school period ends, so they reduce the amount they supply, leading to a leftward shift in the supply curve, and the opposite if they believe that students will continue to buy more backpacks, leading to a rightward shift in the curve. Number 5, price of other outputs. If two products exist in a certain market that a company produces and one becomes more popular than the other, then the firm will supply more of that product and decrease the supply of the other unpopular product, affecting the supply curve of each product in different ways. And lastly, simply the number of suppliers in the market for a certain product will affect the supply curve. Let's say a neighborhood has several suppliers for potted plants. If some of those suppliers close down their businesses, then that will cause a leftward shift in the supply curve. But if more businesses open up to supply potted plants, then we can expect that supply curve to shift to the right. There you have it. You've learned about supply and demand, how it relates to supply and demand curves on a quantity and price level graph, and the specific determinants that can cause rightward or leftward shifts. So far, we've looked at supply and demand separately, but in the next installment, we'll put these concepts together and learn about the essential study of market equilibrium. See you then. Until then, have fun and keep learning.